Our Inspirational Indie Authors podcast stream is proudly sponsored by Book Vault. Sell high-quality print-on-demand books directly to readers worldwide and earn maximum royalties selling directly. Automate fulfillment and create stunning special editions with Book Vault Bespoke. Visit bookvault.app today for an instant quote. I'm Howard Lovey of the Alliance of Independent Authors and book editor at howardlovey.com, and you're listening to Inspirational Indie Authors. Every episode, I interview an Ally member to find out what inspires them and how they are an inspiration to other authors. My guest this episode is Annie Fox, an educator and author who writes for young adults. She talks about how her background in human development shapes her fiction, why she chose to go indie, and what it really takes to reach readers in a crowded market. Her work explores identity, belonging, and what it means to find your people. I'll let Annie Fox tell her story.
Hi, my name is Annie Fox, and I'm a young adult author. My latest book is called Lita Simtar, A Life on Two Planets, which you might guess is a science fiction story. And the publication date is March 11th, so that's coming around pretty soon. I'm not a huge reader of science fiction, but this story about this girl who is a one-of-a-kind interspecies hybrid seemed to cry out for literally two worlds that she could be living on. She leaves her home planet to find home somewhere else because she is so different from everybody else. And yeah, I'm not giving away any spoilers, but she has to travel 40 light years before she finds a place that feels accepting and welcoming to her.
And like a lot of science fiction, it's probably grounded in some form of reality or current events, but we'll talk about that a little later. First, tell me where you grew up, and was reading and writing always part of your life?
Oh, yes, absolutely. My mom taught me how to read when I was 3. And she did that by just having me sit on her lap and point to the words in the books that were open. And I'm sure I just memorized the sight vocabulary, as a lot of young children do, and then figured out the code. And best thing I ever learned, I grew up in metropolitan New York. And when I was 6, my family relocated to Nassau County on Long Island, and there happened to be a privately owned children's library there. It was the only one in the country. It has since become part of the public library in Westbury, New York. But when I moved there, it was a separate building and open to the public, but privately owned children's collection of books. And it was just a wonderland to me. I was living close enough to that building that I was able to, even as a 6-year-old, go there on my own and take out books. It opened worlds for me. And as a high school student, I actually worked in that library shelving books. And my first children's book, which I wrote and illustrated during one of the summers of my undergraduate years, was shepherded into publication by that children's librarian who happened to know an editor at Holiday House in New York. Libraries and librarians and books have always been super important to me. It always felt
You
like
were
home.
networking and making those connections early in life, too.
Yeah, really.
So where did you go to college, and what did you study?
I went to Cornell University in upstate New York, and my undergraduate degree was in human development and family dynamics. And then I went to the New York State College, I guess it's university now, at Cortland, and got a master's in education.
And what turned you on to teaching and education?
I've just always been one of these people who loves kids, and teaching kids to be good people actually is the name of a
Hmm.
book that I wrote. It's all about character education for me, not necessarily reading or spelling or math. I just wanted to spend time with kids to learn about them and to take what I knew about how humans develop to be able to hit those key points in development with stories and creative content for them. So I've also spent a lot of time creating computer games for kids.
Tell me a little more about your background in human development. Are we all pretty much set by the time we're grown up, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think conventional wisdom is that by the time you're 5, your personality is pretty set. But I am, if nothing else, Howard, an eternal optimist and an idealist. And I believe that we always have the capacity to learn and to grow. It's super important to, as a content creator myself, to know when those points of development happen for kids. And if you can write stories that feature characters that are at the same point as your reader audience or maybe a little ahead, and you've done a good enough job, then your reader can identify with the emotional and psychological journey of the character and go through whatever obstacles we're going to throw at that character and grow with them and learn about decision making. Never at all sacrificing a great story. If stuff about human development, you can hit those sweet spots for your reader and really engage them.
Yeah, I've heard that before, that children or young adults read stories about people who are a little bit older than they are.
Yes, that's absolutely true because where else can you glimpse into the future of what your life might be like? And obviously, in a fictionalized universe, you're going to have characters who will be living a life that doesn't reflect yours at all. In
Hmm.
Laura's situation, she hijacks an escape pod and, as I said, travels 40 light years. None of my readers will have that experience, but they will have the experience of not feeling accepted or at home in their place of origin. That's
Hmm.
really what it's about. And what do you do to find your people? Or, as we say, found family. And this is really a story about that kind of personal journey and discovering your found family where you can actually feel at home, even though it's a zillion miles away from where you started.
How did you make the decision to go from educator to author, or is it all part of the same kind of progression?
It is. It really is for me. I think when I got that first book published by Holiday House, I said I was an undergraduate in college, and it was a pretty sweet thing to have that box of books arrive in my dorm. And it was like, wow. And then the royalty checks started coming. I thought, wow, this thing that I created months and years ago is still paying off. And reading reviews, seeing that something I had created had touched kids far beyond the story time circle that I was used to reading books to kids in, it really sparked my imagination. So I think at that point, I didn't really see myself as someone who was going to be contained in a classroom, that I wanted to reach a much broader audience, but still creating content that would spark imagination and open young hearts and minds. And so I still think of myself as an educator, but a fictional
Hmm.
educator.
An educator who uses fiction. You're very
Yeah.
much a real educator. You're not fictional. So,
Sometimes I wonder though,
right.
it's like you spend so much time with your fictional characters, that line between fiction and reality sometimes gets blurred.
That's a hazard of the trade. I've been there myself.
True.
So you started out with a traditional publishing deal. How did you migrate to indie publishing?
Lita Centaur is my 14th book, and the first 6 were published traditionally. And what I discovered is that as publishing companies started getting gobbling up other publishing companies, there were fewer doors to knock on. Also discovered that getting an agent for fiction was a lot more challenging than the I kind of landed into a publishing deal and never really had an agent and never needed one, first with Holiday House and then with my longtime publisher, Free Spirit Publishing. But when I decided really my heart was in writing, full length kind of stories, that I needed a literary agent, or so conventional wisdom said. And that was soul crushing. It's
Yeah.
like the idea of spending all your time querying agents, and sometimes that they had to go through 100 or 200 submissions a day and
Yeah.
they weren't going to give you much time. Sometimes you'd get a form letter back. Sometimes you wouldn't hear from them for literally 18 months.
Hmm.
Then what am I supposed to be doing here? Twiddling my thumbs and waiting for somebody to tell me that this book deserves to be read by people.
Right. It is a soul-crushing experience. I've heard
It is.
that description before, and I've been through it myself. It's horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's horrible. And then so you start thinking about gatekeepers and who gets to decide what people get to read. And as book communities on social media started exploding, it just seemed to me that you didn't need the gatekeeper anymore. That if you were savvy enough, that you could not only write something that was worth reading, but you could directly tap into your audience. And so I said, who needs to give an agent 15% of my 10% that the publisher is then going to take 90% of my book? Let me do it myself. And so my husband, David Fox, and I started Electric Eggplant, which is our publishing company. We've done computer games, and it wasn't hard for us to segue into first picture books and other things. And so when my first novel came out a year ago, which is called The Little Things That Kill, it's a teen friendship afterlife apology tour.
Ah.
It's a paranormal mystery.
Hmm.
He said, yeah, let's do this. Let's do this. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a tremendous amount of work, not just to write the book. That's almost the easy part, which is not easy, but the marketing part of it.
Yeah.
And knowing where to send something in for reviews and how to create a TikTok video that's actually going to attract attention, how to produce an audiobook, which we've done for both of these novels. And I am not the narrator. Hiring professionals to do the cover design, to do the interior, to do the marketing, to narrate the audiobook, all of this stuff, top level quality. It costs money and it costs time, but it's so gratifying because it's all yours.
Absolutely. Yeah. And of course, as an educator, you make millions of dollars a year, so you can afford all
Absolutely.
this.
So I had a treasure trove of money to just put into
Right,
the
right.
books.
I love the name of your company, Electric Eggplant. Is there a story
Yeah.
behind that, or is it a private
I'm a
joke? Or?
gardener.
Ah,
Yeah,
okay,
no, I'm a gardener and I grow stuff in my backyard, and eggplants are beautiful. And so we thought of this idea to electrify an eggplant, and the little logo actually has a little purple eggplant with a power cord going out of it into a wall.
great, wonderful. You mentioned marketing earlier, and one question
Yes.
that I have with the age group that you're aiming at, are you marketing to parents and educators as well as the readers, or who are you marketing to?
It's a really good question, Howard. Teens, I say Lita Simtar is a book for age 12 and up. A lot of my early reviewers are in their 30s and 40s and beyond. So I definitely think of it as a young adult novel, but the themes are such that adults can relate to them. Who buys books? For younger readers, picture book and middle grade, those kids are not buying books. So you would be marketing to parents, to school librarians and public librarians. But for this book, because my readership is often on social media, podcasts like this that are hosted by teenagers is a place where I go. I also know that many of the book talk and Instabook community members are younger, or that they specialize in reviewing books for whatever age their own children are. And so there are ways to get into that. Kirkus Review just gave us a wonderful review. And I know that publication is viewed by public and school librarians. It is, and bookstore owners. So that's another way to be savvy about how you get your message out. And as you say, who's buying these books? If a teenager wanders into a bookstore or sees a recommended young adult sci-fi list on somebody's website, I want to make sure that I'm on that list.
Right. Now, what about the content itself? Is that something that you market directly to the kids? So this is cool sci-fi, or this is educational for the
No,
parents?
it's not educational. It's pure story. If you see the cover, it looks like part of a graphic novel, which is cool because one of my lead characters is actually a graphic novelist. So the fantasy is that maybe he drew the picture on the cover. But I think that there's no one path for marketing. I think you have to hit a lot of them, which is why it's so exhausting. We're also reaching out to book influencers right now because the book is going to be out in 8 days. And I curated a list of people who love YA and love science fiction. And reached out to them on social media and said, hey, would you be interested not only in reviewing this book, but getting a deluxe book box? And we curated a bunch of items that are book themed. Uh,
Hmm.
my character, for example, loves onion rings. Okay. She comes to this planet. The food on her home planet is pretty meh, but she comes to Earth and someone introduces her to fried onion rings and she goes bananas. She loves them. And so we thought it would be fun if we put a batter mix for onion rings in the book box.
Wonderful. That's great. It worked for ET and Reese's Pieces. Yeah,
Oh,
why
yeah,
not?
there you
Yeah.
go.
Now, I should
Yeah.
mention that we're recording this on March 3rd, but this will air in a few weeks. So by the time this is out, your book will already be out too, and we'll have information in the blog surrounding this, how to get your book. So you also have other hobbies when you're not writing. You mentioned art, baking, gardening, photography. Does it all feed into each other?
I'm also an avid hiker, and part of my book is because I live in Northern California and the story takes place in the spring. Yes, I think it all feeds in because there I was, if you can imagine, viewing spring last year through the eyes of someone who was really a stranger in a strange land and whose home planet is arid and dry and sandy with unrelenting winds. And she is by trade a biologist, a botanist, in fact. And so for her to come to Northern California in the full bloom of spring, it's mind blowing to her. Even the flowing of water in streams and waterfalls, this is not something she's used to. So as a hiker, in the midst of writing this story, I put my own perspective into Lita and thought, what would she think of this? And I think in that way, not only did it reawaken me to appreciate this beautiful place where I live and hike, but also to take that perspective of someone seeing it for the first time.
Now, the last thing I want to do is be political on this show, but are you also drawing any analogies to current events or things like the issue of immigration?
Hey, man, I am happy to be political. Lita Centaur comes from a planet called Fure, where to be different is not okay. Even though she's not the only interspecies hybrid on her planet, she is decidedly different. She is 6.5 feet tall, and on her planet, people rarely get above 5'2". So she stands out in that way, but her behavior is so vastly different. She's emotional, she's unpredictable. When things bother her, she lets you know. Whether things are unjust, she will let you know. When something touches her heart, she will weep openly. This is not what anybody's like. And so she never feels welcome there. And so, in some ways, it is an immigrant story, someone who's different in a world where it's not okay to be different. The mantra of her world is one mind, one goal, one family. But the truth is that it isn't really one family. And if you're not part of this purebred culture, you are never accepted into the family.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's that. Uh-huh.
Yeah, I guess, is there a balancing act between sort of the message and just telling a good story?
No, because I think that the good story is always what's important. But when you know your characters really well, your job as an author is to give them a mission. And of course, you're going to throw obstacles in their way, but every decision they make has to come from the core of who they really are. And Lita is, if nothing else, someone with a very big heart and a very open mind. And I wanted to challenge her in that way. When she comes to Earth, she is not welcomed. There are those conspiracy theory people who believe that UFOs are here and they're here to enslave Earth. And she has to deal with that kind of prejudice, and which is different, but in some ways equally as threatening and unwelcoming as what she was dealing with on her home planet.
Mhm.
So it's always a good story. But it's got to be three-dimensional in that way. And what I mean by that is it's not like this happens and this happens. Yeah, but she's growing and changing with everything. She's adapting. She is, as I say, a stranger in a strange land. So how is she to survive? And her mission is to find home. So it's not to go back to home, but to find that sense of home within herself. And I find it intriguing. Whenever you come up with a story, I think it has to have enough parameters and depth that it's going to engage me for the year or two that I'm going to be working on it absolutely full time.
Now, you've been doing this for a little while now. Are there any trends right now in young adult literature?
I read a lot of young adult literature because when it's good, it's great. And like I say, the people who are writing it, they know the developmental points on that growth chart that fits their readers, then I know they've done their homework. In terms of trends, someone gave me some good advice once, especially if you're an indie author, write the book you want to write. If you start writing for some future marketing campaign, you're going to end up not being really happy with what you've written. So that's the first and foremost. This is a book that I would like to read.
And you don't have a publisher or an agent to tell you no. So you can take more chances and actually write what you want to write.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely can. And if you don't, you've wasted a golden opportunity to really express yourself creatively.
What advice would you give to other aspiring indie authors?
I say write every day, make time for your craft, prioritize it. They say that we make time for things we prioritize. So often people will come up to me at conferences and say, "Oh, I've always wanted to be a writer. Oh, that's so cool that you're a writer." And without being sardonic, I said, "You have this aspiration. How far forward on the burner is it? Or is it something that you aspire to do sometime in the future? If you've got an hour a day, or even an hour a week to shut yourself off in a room and actually feed this part of you that needs to express itself through story making, then do it. All you need is a piece of paper and a pencil, really. It's not like I want to be a filmmaker and I need cast, crew, and a bunch of equipment, though that's changed too. I think people sometimes have an idea that being a writer is something romantic. But really, most of the time, I'm sitting alone in a room with the door closed, talking to characters that aren't actually visible. Someone once told me that there are people who sit in a closed up room and talk to people who aren't there, and we call them insane. And there are other people who sit in a closed up room and talk to people who aren't there, and we call them writers.
Exactly. And you take your pick as to which is which.
Yeah, I know. I think you have to at least let go of the reality of the four walls.
What you came up with lately is Lita Simtar, A Life on Two Planets, which explores the journey of an interspecies hybrid seeking her identity. That sounds fascinating. And that comes out, well, that should be out by the time this podcast airs. Thank you very much, Annie. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and give us your wisdom on young adult writing and indie publishing.
Thank you for this opportunity, Howard. I enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you, Annie. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to Inspirational Indie Authors. I'm Howard Lovey, Content and Communications Manager at the Alliance of Independent Authors and book editor at howardlovey.com. This podcast stream is proudly sponsored by Book Vault. Sell high-quality print-on-demand books directly to readers worldwide and earn maximum royalties selling directly. Automate fulfillment and create stunning special editions with Book Vault Bespoke. Visit bookvault.app today for an instant quote. If you are a member of Ally and would like to be considered for the show, please write to me at howard@allianceindependentauthors.org and tell me what inspires you and how you can inspire other authors. As always, find more author advice, tips, and tools at our Self-Publishing Advice Center, selfpublishingadvice.org. And if you haven't already, we invite you to join our organization and become a self-publishing ally. You can do that at allianceindependentauthors.org.